The grand ballroom was a vision of elegance and sophistication. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting soft, golden light that reflected off the polished marble floors. A symphony of well-dressed guests mingled, their laughter and chatter filling the air. The room exuded the unmistakable scent of luxury. Floral arrangements of orchids and lilies, the faint hint of expensive perfume, and the smooth clink of champagne flutes. The event was a glittering celebration of success, a night where the city's elite came together to honor their accomplishments and bask in their shared achievements. Jasmine Moore stood at the edge of the ballroom, her eyes scanning the crowd. Her presence was commanding, yet graceful. At 35, Jasmine had built her life from the ground up. Her dark, flawless skin shimmered under the soft glow of the chandeliers, and her natural curls were styled in an elegant updo. She wore a sleek, midnight blue gown that hugged her figure, its delicate fabric catching the light with every movement. Jasmine wasn't just attending the event, she belonged here. She had worked tirelessly to get to this point, and tonight was a celebration of her strength, independence, and resilience. She had come a long way since her divorce from Victor Daniels, and her life now was a far cry from the fragile, uncertain woman she had once been. After years of working in corporate law, Jasmine had successfully launched her own consulting firm, helping businesses with sustainable growth strategies. Her clients valued her not just for her sharp intellect, but for her unwavering confidence and poise under pressure. Jasmine was a woman who commanded respect, and she had earned every bit of it. Despite her success, however, tonight's event was filled with reminders of her past. As she looked around, her gaze fell on the familiar face of her ex-husband, Victor. He was standing across the room, his arm around the waist of a stunning young woman. The woman's platinum blonde hair and sharp features made her stand out in the crowd, and Jasmine couldn't help but notice the smug expression on Victor's face as he whispered something in her ear. Sophia Harris, Victor's new girlfriend, was everything Jasmine was not. She was young, beautiful, and wildly successful in her own right, with a social media empire that seemed to capture the attention of everyone around her. Jasmine had heard about Sophia's extravagant lifestyle, the designer clothes, the jet-set lifestyle, the millions of followers. Everything about Sophia screamed perfection, and in some ways she was everything Victor had always desired, the fresh, vibrant face of youth, fame, and fortune. Jasmine, on the other hand, had never sought attention in the same way. Her beauty was subtle, her grace was quiet, and her success spoke for itself. She didn't need to be the center of attention to know her worth. And yet, as she watched Victor and Sophia, a flicker of something, was it jealousy, anger, stirred within her. They looked so comfortable together, so perfect. And for a brief moment, she wondered if she had been enough for Victor. Had she done enough to keep him? Had she failed? But just as quickly as the thought came, she dismissed it. She had moved on from him. She had built a life that was hers and hers alone. She didn't need Victor or anyone else to define her. Jasmine took a deep breath and smiled. Tonight was not about the past. Tonight was about her present and her future. And she was going to make sure that nothing, not even her ex-husband and his new girlfriend, would ruin that for her. She straightened her back, adjusting the strap of her gown, and made her way through the crowd, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Her eyes never strayed far from Victor and Sophia. Though she didn't show it, she could feel their eyes on her too, but she refused to let their presence disturb her. Jasmine had worked hard to get where she was, and she wasn't going to let them take that from her. The night was still young, and Jasmine was determined to enjoy it on her terms. She moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, exchanging pleasantries with colleagues and friends. And yet, in the back of her mind, she knew that the past she had worked so hard to leave behind might soon come rushing back in a way she couldn't predict. Jasmine moved through the glittering crowd with ease, her black gown sweeping elegantly behind her as she made her way toward the refreshment table. Her posture was poised, confident, and every step she took seemed to reaffirm her sense of accomplishment. The lavish gala at the exclusive venue felt like the perfect occasion for her to relish in the fruits of her success. She had worked hard to rebuild her life after her divorce from Victor, and tonight was about celebrating her newfound freedom and strength. As the soft hum of conversations and the clinking of glasses filled the air, Jasmine found herself lost in the moment. She could feel the weight of her achievements, no longer dependent on anyone, no longer tied to the past. She was her own woman now, strong and independent. Then, just as she was about to grab a glass of champagne, her eyes caught sight of a familiar face across the room. It was Victor, her ex-husband, standing there with a woman by his side. The sight of them together sent an unexpected jolt through her. She knew it was coming, the new girlfriend, the show of wealth, the blatant display of happiness. But seeing it in front of her, in this moment, stung more than she had anticipated. Victor was dressed in his usual tailored suit, looking every bit the picture of success that he had always been, exuding an air of confidence and smugness. His arm was wrapped possessively around the waist of the woman beside him. A young, beautiful woman with porcelain skin and the kind of effortless glamour that only wealth could cultivate. Jasmine recognized her immediately. Sophia, the woman Victor had left her for. Sophia was everything Jasmine was not in their marriage, young, vibrant, and admired in their social circles. As the couple made their way through the room, they laughed together, completely oblivious to the presence of Jasmine, or so it seemed. But as they drew closer, Victor's eyes finally locked onto hers, and a twisted smirk crossed his face. His lips curled as if he had won some sort of silent battle. He stepped away from Sophia, walking toward Jasmine with a deliberate, slow pace. "Well, well, Jasmine," Victor's voice rang out, dripping with sarcasm as he approached. "Fancy seeing you here. I thought you'd be hiding away in your little corner of the world, out of sight, out of mind." Jasmine stood still, her expression unreadable, as she faced him. She had braced herself for this, but it still stung to hear his words. Her heart didn't race, nor did she feel the anger bubble up as it once would have. Instead, she held her ground, the woman she had become standing firmly in her place. Victor took another step closer, his gaze cold and dismissive. "I guess you must be really proud of yourself, huh?" he continued, his words cutting through the air. "It must feel nice to be a woman of independence now, though let's be real, you couldn't keep me, and now you're just trying to convince yourself that you're better off without me." Sophia, standing just behind him, joined in with a mocking laugh. "Oh, Jasmine, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You know, no matter how hard you try, you'll never have what I have. Victor and I, well, we just fit, don't we?" She eyed Jasmine with a pointed look, her words intended to wound. "You're just an afterthought, someone left behind." The crowd seemed to grow quieter as the exchange unfolded. Jasmine could feel the eyes of the room on her, the whispers growing louder in her mind. Yet in the midst of it all, she remained calm. Victor's words stung, but they didn't break her. Instead, she took a breath, her posture never faltering. This was no longer the woman who would let the cruelty of others dictate her emotions. Her silence was the loudest response she could give. The tension in the room thickened as Victor's mocking words lingered in the air, the sting of his insults hanging heavily between them. Jasmine stood still, her face an expression of calm strength, but beneath the surface, the words of her ex-husband cut deep. She could feel the weight of his cruelty, but she refused to let him see the vulnerability he sought. Just as the whispers and stares of the crowd grew louder, a new presence filled the space, cutting through the venomous atmosphere like a breath of fresh air. Ethan, standing tall and confident, appeared at Jasmine's side, his dark eyes steady and unflinching. His presence was commanding, yet gentle, and when his hand lightly landed on Jasmine's shoulder, a sense of protection radiated from him. The moment Ethan made his appearance, all eyes in the room turned toward him. Victor's words faltered as he shifted his attention to the newcomer, his confident smirk wavering ever so slightly. Ethan's expression was calm but resolute, his voice deep and unwavering as he addressed the situation with a clarity that silenced the murmurs. "Victor," Ethan's voice rang out, cutting through the tension. "Enough." His tone was firm, authoritative, and filled with an undeniable power that commanded respect. "Stop insulting my wife. If you have a problem with her, you take it up with me, but not here, not now." The room seemed to hold its collective breath as Ethan stood tall beside Jasmine, his stance protective, but also imbued with a sense of genuine affection for her. His hand remained on her shoulder, an anchor for Jasmine in the midst of this public spectacle. The air crackled with tension as Ethan's presence shifted the dynamic of the entire room. Victor's face reddened, his smirk turning into a frown of disbelief. "Your wife?" he scoffed, clearly taken aback. "You think she—" "Yes," Ethan interrupted him sharply, his voice cutting through the room with an undeniable edge. "She is my wife, and she deserves to be treated with respect. If you cannot do that, then you are no longer welcome here." He didn't wait for a response as he continued, his voice growing louder, more resolute. "If you continue to behave in such a disrespectful manner, I will personally withdraw my investment from your company, and I will make sure everyone in this room knows why." A stunned silence filled the room as Ethan's words echoed through the air. For a moment it seemed like the entire gala paused, every eye fixed on the scene unfolding before them. Victor's arrogance faltered in the face of Ethan's quiet yet unshakable authority. The wealthy, powerful businessman found himself on the defensive, his previous smugness melting away. Ethan, his hand still resting lightly on Jasmine's shoulder, turned his attention back to her. The atmosphere in the room had shifted, the tension now palpable, with every eye watching what would happen next. With a sense of finality, Ethan reached into the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. The room seemed to still as the box was held in the air, its contents hidden, yet the significance of the moment was undeniable. He opened the box slowly, and inside lay a diamond ring that shimmered with a brilliance that could rival the stars. It was a piece of pure elegance, its value staggering, but it wasn't the price of the ring that mattered. It was the meaning behind it. Ethan turned to Jasmine, his eyes softening as he gazed at her. "This," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with an undeniable tenderness, "is for the woman who has endured more than anyone should ever have to. Jasmine, you deserve more than this world has given you. You deserve respect, love, and everything that you are entitled to. You deserve a future, not defined by your past, but by the strength you carry in your heart." The crowd watched, transfixed, as Ethan gently slid the $10 million ring onto Jasmine's finger. The act was symbolic in its simplicity, yet it was a declaration of ownership, of respect, and of the life they would build together. Ethan, with a quiet yet powerful gesture, affirmed Jasmine's worth and her place in the world. Not as the woman scorned, but as the woman cherished. Jasmine, her eyes brimming with emotion, felt the weight of the moment sink in. This was no longer about the past, no longer about the man who had betrayed her. It was about the future, about the love and respect that she had found in Ethan. The murmurs from the crowd shifted from surprise to admiration, and Jasmine knew, in that moment, that she was no longer invisible. Victor's face drained of color, his arrogance dissolving into nothing as he realized the gravity of the situation. The ring on Jasmine's finger was a testament to something that he could never take back, something he had lost when he walked away from her. The man who had once belittled her was now standing in the shadow of a power he could never hope to touch. Ethan stood by Jasmine's side, his hand resting gently on hers as he turned back to the crowd. The applause that followed was soft at first, but soon grew louder, a show of respect for the power of love and the undeniable strength of a woman who had risen above her past. In that moment, Jasmine Moore was no longer just the woman scorned. She was a woman reborn. And as Ethan led her from the gala, their hands intertwined, the world seemed to open up before them, their future brighter than ever. The atmosphere in the room grew dense with tension. Victor and Sophia, both still basking in their own arrogance, continued to mock and humiliate Jasmine. Their words dripped with disdain, their eyes filled with contempt as they stared down at her, as though she were beneath them. The room seemed to hold its breath, every single guest aware of the cruelty unfolding before them, yet no one dared to speak up. It was as if the very air had thickened, stifling any voice of dissent. The room was filled with a silent, uncomfortable observation, every eye watching, no one intervening. Jasmine stood still, her chin held high despite the venomous words directed at her. She had learned long ago not to show vulnerability in moments like these. But as Victor's sneers grew sharper and more cutting, the smile on Sophia's face more cruel, a faint flicker of frustration began to stir within Jasmine. It wasn't just the words. It was the way they looked at her, like she was a joke, an afterthought, a woman who had lost the game of life. Despite the sting of their taunts, she refused to let them see the hurt. She wouldn't let them win. But then something shifted. A presence filled the space, an undeniable force that cut through the condescending remarks and piercing glances. Ethan's figure appeared, tall and imposing, standing beside Jasmine in a moment of unspoken solidarity. The change was palpable. His presence was magnetic, and where his gaze fell, the atmosphere shifted with an intensity that stunned everyone in the room. Without a word, Ethan placed his hand on Jasmine's shoulder, a protective gesture that was subtle yet powerful. His eyes, dark and filled with resolve, were locked on Victor and Sophia. The room, previously filled with whispered murmurs, fell silent, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Ethan, in his calm, unflinching manner, broke the silence with a voice that was low but carried authority, a voice that could not be ignored. "I don't know whether I've walked into some kind of ridiculous performance, or if this is real life," he began, his words slicing through the air. He turned to Victor, his gaze cold and steady, unblinking. "But the one thing I do know is that here stands a man who has failed to appreciate the woman standing next to him, and a woman who has been deceived and disrespected to this extent." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Every eye in the room was now fixed on Ethan. The previous tension in the room had evaporated, replaced by an undeniable air of anticipation. Victor and Sophia stood frozen, their confidence suddenly deflating as they were caught off guard by Ethan's direct and unwavering response. Victor, once a man of power and influence, now appeared small and helpless. His mouth opened and closed, struggling to form a response, but nothing came. Ethan didn't stop there. With a controlled, deliberate stride, he turned fully toward Victor. His voice, now filled with cold certainty, rang out. "You walked out of this marriage, Victor, as if it were nothing more than an inconvenience. But today, you will pay for it. Today, it's not just the end of your relationship with Jasmine, it's the beginning of you losing everything that truly matters to you." Victor's face drained of color, his arrogant posture now crumbling before the sheer intensity of Ethan's words. There was no bravado left in him. His gaze faltered as the weight of Ethan's statement settled over him. He was no longer in control of the situation, no longer the man he had once been in Jasmine's life. The tables had turned, and for the first time he was confronted with the truth. Jasmine was no longer the woman he had cast aside. She was a woman with power, and someone who had found someone who saw her for who she truly was. The guests in the room began to murmur, their disbelief rising with every word Ethan spoke. The tension in the room was so thick it felt almost suffocating. Even those who had been standing in silent observation were now leaning forward, intrigued by what was unfolding. The moment was charged with an energy that only heightened as Ethan took another step forward, positioning himself firmly between Jasmine and Victor. Sophia, ever the attention-seeker, attempted to speak up, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But Ethan didn't give her the chance. His gaze shifted to her, his eyes narrowing with a quiet threat. "I've heard enough," he stated calmly. "If either of you have any more disrespect to offer, I suggest you leave now." His voice was unwavering, filled with a cold finality that made it impossible for anyone in the room to doubt his resolve. The room fell completely silent. Every person in the room could feel the weight of Ethan's authority, and they could feel the shift in power. Victor, realizing that he was powerless in this moment, stood frozen in disbelief. His arrogance had crumbled, and in its place there was only shame. Ethan turned back to Jasmine, his demeanor softening. His hand gently brushed against her arm, a silent gesture of reassurance. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, everything else in the room faded away. "You are everything to me," he said quietly, just for her to hear. The sincerity in his words was undeniable, and in that moment, Jasmine's heart fluttered with a mix of gratitude and triumph. As the room watched, stunned by Ethan's unyielding defense of Jasmine, it was clear that this wasn't just a confrontation. It was a statement. Ethan wasn't merely protecting his wife. He was showing the world, including Victor and Sophia, that Jasmine was no longer a woman to be mocked or dismissed. She was a woman who was respected, loved, and protected. Victor and Sophia, humiliated in front of everyone, were left to retreat. Their presence in the room was no longer needed. their actions now exposed for what they truly were. As they turned and left, the entire room seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Jasmine, standing with Ethan at her side, knew this was just the beginning. She had not only reclaimed her power, but she had done so with the support of the man who truly valued her. And as the applause from the crowd grew louder, Jasmine allowed herself a small smile. The world had just seen her strength, and it would never forget it. The tension in the room thickened, and for a moment it seemed as if time itself had come to a standstill. Ethan's words hung in the air, a sharp declaration that would change everything. His gaze was unwavering as he turned from Victor and Sophia to the event manager, who had been watching with growing discomfort. The entire room, once filled with the soft hum of conversations, now sat in tense silence, waiting for the next move. With a steady voice, Ethan spoke again, cutting through the quiet like a knife. "Take these two out of the party. They don't belong here." His words were firm and final, leaving no room for debate or negotiation. The manager, who had been quietly observing the escalating situation, hesitated for a brief moment before nodding and moving towards Victor and Sophia. But Ethan wasn't finished. "And all my contracts with Victor and his company, effective immediately, are terminated," Ethan continued, his tone even and resolute. The words landed like a heavy blow. In an instant, the weight of what Ethan had just said hit Victor like a freight train. His face paled, the color draining from his features. The reality of the situation began to settle in, and the crowd, though still silent, could almost feel the shift in the room's energy. Sophia, ever the self-assured woman, was suddenly at a loss for words. Her usual smirk faded into a look of pure disbelief. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words never came. Her eyes darted from Ethan to Victor, then back to Ethan, as if searching for a way out of this unexpected confrontation. But the damage had already been done. Ethan had spoken, and there was no going back. Victor, who had once prided himself on his control and influence, stood frozen, unable to react. His chest tightened, his mind racing to find a way to salvage what little dignity remained. But all he could do was stare at Ethan, unable to form any words, his throat constricting in disbelief. His entire empire, his carefully constructed world, was crumbling in front of him. In that moment, Victor realized how deeply he had underestimated the power of Ethan and Jasmine's bond. As the silence stretched on, Ethan took a step forward, his presence commanding the room. He moved with purpose, walking toward Jasmine, who had remained composed throughout the exchange. She was a picture of calm strength, her posture unshaken, her eyes steady. Ethan reached out, his hand gently pulling her toward him, and in that instant the tension that had been hanging between them seemed to dissipate. Their eyes locked, and without saying a word, they shared a silent understanding, a mutual recognition of everything they had been through together. Ethan leaned in slightly, his voice soft but resolute, meant only for Jasmine to hear. "We've come through everything, Jasmine, and now it's time for them to see just how strong we are." Jasmine's heart fluttered slightly at his words, but her face remained calm, her expression one of quiet triumph. She nodded gently, her gaze shifting to Victor and Sophia, who were now being escorted from the room, their faces a picture of humiliation. There was no more pain in Jasmine's eyes, no hint of the insecurity that had once plagued her. The woman who had walked into this room, vulnerable and uncertain, was now gone. In her place stood a woman who had been freed from the shackles of her past. For the first time, Jasmine felt truly liberated. She wasn't defined by the mistakes or the failures of her previous marriage. She was no longer bound by the whispers of doubt or the echoes of Victor's insults. The weight that had once dragged her down was lifted, and with it came a sense of freedom she had never known before. She looked at Victor and Sophia one last time, not with anger or sorrow, but with quiet resolve. They were nothing to her now. They were mere shadows of the past, fading away as she embraced the life that was waiting for her. In the security of Ethan's embrace, Jasmine felt a warmth that went beyond just physical comfort. It was the warmth of someone who truly saw her, who respected her for all that she was and all that she had overcome. As they stood there, the weight of the moment settling in, Jasmine realized something profound. She had fought for herself, and in doing so, she had found a strength she never knew she had. The room, which had been thick with tension moments before, now seemed to relax. Guests who had been too afraid to speak up began to murmur among themselves, their whispers now filled with admiration for Jasmine. Ethan's protective stance by her side had made an undeniable statement. In this moment, Jasmine was no longer the woman who had been scorned or abandoned. She was a woman who had reclaimed her power, a woman who had risen above the disrespect of her past and was now standing stronger than ever. Victor and Sophia, now mere bystanders in their own lives, were being ushered out, their earlier confidence shattered. Their defeat was complete. And as the crowd watched their exit, the air shifted once more, this time with a sense of collective release. Jasmine had not only fought for herself, she had fought for every person who had ever been made to feel small, insignificant, or dismissed. And in doing so, she had won, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been overlooked. As the sounds of the gala continued around them, Jasmine turned to Ethan, her heart full of gratitude. In his eyes, she saw everything she needed to see. He had stood by her, not just as her husband, but as her partner in every sense of the word. And in that moment, she knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The air in the room, still thick with the remnants of the confrontation, seemed to freeze as Ethan's voice rang out again, clear and commanding. The entire gala was held in suspense, every conversation suddenly stilled by his words. Ethan's gaze never left Jasmine's, the soft but firm tone of his voice cutting through the lingering tension. "I want a $10 million diamond ring to be presented to Jasmine right here in front of all of you," Ethan declared, his eyes locked on the crowd as he slowly turned his attention back to Jasmine, who stood frozen in disbelief. "This ring will serve as a symbol of the love and respect I have for her, and I want everyone in this room to see it, to see her for the incredible woman she is." The words hung in the air, heavy and profound. Jasmine stood motionless, her heart racing, her mind unable to process the reality of the moment. The applause from earlier had died down, and now only the soft clink of glasses and the low hum of the chandeliers overhead broke the silence. The eyes of every guest in the room were trained on her. She couldn't breathe for a moment, not sure whether she should speak or simply let this surreal moment wash over her. The event manager, equally stunned by the sudden change of atmosphere, took a hesitant step forward, a diamond-studded velvet box in his hands. The box was small, but seemed to hold the weight of the world as he handed it to Ethan, who immediately turned to Jasmine. The soft light of the chandelier overhead seemed to shine directly on the diamond ring, making it sparkle like a star, casting a warm glow that surrounded Jasmine like a halo. Ethan held the box with one hand, his other gently taking Jasmine's, his touch firm yet tender. "Jasmine," he said softly, his voice filled with affection, "you are not just my wife. You are the woman I want the entire world to know and admire. I will protect you, not just with my words, but with every action I take. Anyone who disrespects you will have to face me." Jasmine's breath caught in her throat, her eyes wide in disbelief. The weight of the diamond ring in her hand seemed insignificant compared to the magnitude of the love and protection Ethan was offering her. She could feel the warmth of his hand on hers, the unspoken promise in his words resonating deep within her chest. Ethan wasn't just speaking of a marriage, he was laying the foundation of a partnership, one that would stand unshaken by the superficiality of others. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow down, as if the world outside the gala had ceased to exist. All Jasmine could hear was the soft pounding of her heart, racing with emotions she had buried for years. Victor's cruel words, the humiliations of the past, all of it faded into the background as the light from the chandelier danced on the diamond in her hand. She wasn't just being given a ring, she was being given her dignity back, her worth, her voice. As Ethan's words echoed through the room, the silence that followed was broken by the sudden, thunderous applause of the guests. The sound reverberated across the grand hall, the vibrations filled with admiration and respect, not only for Ethan's courage and honor, but for the quiet strength and resilience that Jasmine embodied. People who had once remained silent, observing from the sidelines, now clapped with fervor, drawn to the raw authenticity and power of the moment. Ethan had not only defended Jasmine, but he had also shown the world what true love and loyalty looked like. Love that didn't need to be announced with grand gestures, but proved in moments of vulnerability and unyielding support. Jasmine, still holding the ring, allowed herself a brief smile, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She had never imagined such a moment in her life, never thought she could be so valued, so seen. And yet here she stood, surrounded by people who had once judged her. And now, they were witnessing the strength of her love, the unshakable foundation she had built with Ethan. The applause was deafening, but it wasn't the noise that filled Jasmine's heart. It was the silence in which she had stood, unbroken. As Ethan turned to her, his face softened with an expression of tenderness. Jasmine's smile deepened, her heart swelling with gratitude and pride. In that moment, surrounded by the people who had once disregarded her, Jasmine realized that she was more than just the woman they had once seen. She was more than the past they had tried to define her by. With Ethan's protection, love, and respect, she had become a woman reborn, one who had reclaimed her strength and her place in the world. As the applause continued to reverberate, Jasmine held the diamond ring up, letting it catch the light one last time. This wasn't just a symbol of wealth. It was a reminder that no one, no matter how powerful they thought they were, could take away what was truly hers, her self-worth, and she would never let anyone forget it. In the weeks following the gala, the consequences of the confrontation between Ethan, Victor, and Sophia began to unfold with stunning clarity. The world that had once been so welcoming to Victor and Sophia now seemed to turn its back on them, slowly but surely. For Victor, the loss of public admiration was just the beginning. His business ventures, once buoyed by his influence and connections, began to collapse under the weight of his arrogance and mistreatment of those around him. Key investors who had once been eager to collaborate with him now looked elsewhere. The trust that had taken years to build was crumbling, and with each passing day, the opportunities he once took for granted slipped further out of his reach. Sophia, too, faced a dramatic shift in her fortunes. As a social media influencer, her image had been everything to her. But after the public humiliation of her treatment toward Jasmine, the online community turned on her. Her followers, once loyal and enamored by her curated life of luxury, began to unfollow, leaving harsh comments and calling out her hypocrisy. Brands that had once been eager to collaborate with her distanced themselves, and her once thriving online empire began to collapse under the weight of her own arrogance. The power she had once commanded now felt fleeting, as her online presence withered and her influence dwindled. Meanwhile, Jasmine's life took on a new energy, one of independence, confidence, and triumph. She had reclaimed not just her dignity, but her future. With Ethan by her side, her career flourished in ways she had never imagined. The consulting firm she had built with her grit and perseverance continued to expand, and Jasmine found herself becoming a respected voice in the business community. She had grown beyond the need for validation from others. The foundation she had built was strong, and she had earned every success through hard work and dedication. Her relationship with Ethan deepened over time. Their bond wasn't just built on the surface-level comforts of wealth and status. It was a partnership founded on mutual respect, understanding, and love. Ethan stood by her side as she continued to rise in her career, his support unwavering, and together they shared a vision for the future, one filled with endless possibilities. Jasmine had become a symbol of resilience and strength for those around her. Her story, once defined by heartbreak and betrayal, was now one of empowerment and renewal. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone. Her actions spoke louder than any words ever could. Through her perseverance, she had transformed not only her own life, but also the lives of those who admired her for the way she carried herself through adversity. The people who had once doubted her now looked to her as an inspiration. A woman who refused to be defined by the failures of others. Jasmine had learned that true strength wasn't about never falling. It was about getting back up every time, no matter how hard life tried to knock you down. In the end, Jasmine's journey was a testament to the power of self-respect and perseverance. No matter what challenges she faced, she had always remained true to herself, and that strength had allowed her to rise above the negativity that others had tried to impose upon her. The respect and love she had now were not given to her out of pity or sympathy. They were earned, and they were hers to keep. Her message was clear, not just for herself, but for anyone who needed to hear it. Perseverance, self-respect, and the respect of oneself will carry you through, no matter what you've been through. You deserve real respect and true love. Don't let anyone make you crumble. As Jasmine looked ahead, standing taller than ever before, she knew that the best was yet to come. She had already proven that the only limits she had were the ones she placed on herself. And now, nothing and no one could stand in her way. If you were inspired by Jasmine's story of resilience and strength, give us a thumbs up. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder that they are enough. Don't forget to tell us what you think about this video in the comment section. Stay tuned for more stories of empowerment and triumph. Subscribe to join our journey.